So, good morning, everybody. I'm here to share with you a lot of the things that have been going on in people's life that has also taken place in my life. While I was living in Virginia, like I said, I was in the United States Navy. I was stationed in Virginia. When I went to Virginia, I started having problems, and I ended up being separated from the Navy for reasons I still do not understand. I never got a court date. I kept requesting a court date. I kept requesting information to try to go speak with my leaders about everything that was taking place in the military. And the farther up the chain of command that I went, the harder it got for me. So the more people I requested to speak with, the harder it became for me in the United States Navy. And I was doing that because there were people trying to block me from working. There were people trying to manipulate me. There were people that were violating policies, and I kept trying to figure out what is going on, and nobody was doing anything. So I kept sending packages to the United States Navy, to my superiors, because that's the process that they have for you in the United States Navy. You must request to speak to your superiors if you have any issues, and then you continue to take it up. So I took it all the way up to the commanding officer. And what I found was that a lot of those people that I were dealing with were in the Masonic organization, and they completely ignored my request. I requested to speak with someone. I requested to go to court. I requested to be court martial. I never got any of those things. They broke every policy and they ignored all of my rights while I was in the United States Navy. And one day I looked up, I went to work, and before I knew it, I was separated from the United States Navy. They were serving me a DD 214 that did not make sense, that did not have any information on it that was supposed to be in accordance with the policy that they had. And as I kept requesting that, they refused to listen to me. And that's when I found out that day they told me that you cannot come back to the military, or you cannot come back to this base. Even the documents that they gave me didn't make sense. The documents stated that I was temporarily banned from the base. Typically, if you're temporarily banned from the base, and that means that you have permission to come back, that means you're still in the military. But when I was there, they kept telling me I was out. So I was like, well, why are you giving me a document that says I'm temporarily banned from coming back? Give me a document that says that I'm out of the military. So they gave me this DD 214. When I tried to go over it, they wouldn't allow me to do it. The police officer was very aggressive towards me. He refused to hear my request. He refused to do anything, and they forced me off of the base. The military police officers, right? Because you have civilian police officers and you have military. So there are civilians that walk around on the military base. He was a civilian. They forced me off of the base, like in handcuffs. They drove me to my car and told me I had to leave the base with that DD 214. And there was nothing that I could do about it. Right after I got out of the Navy, I kept trying to fight to figure out what happened, what went wrong. I came up with a package. I reached out to Congress. I reached out to Congress in Memphis, Tennessee. I reached out to Congress in Virginia, and people kept ignoring my requests and everything, and people were making jokes and laughing about it. And I kept trying to figure out what is going on, that this is taking place in my life. And then I realized that these people were a part of the Masonic organization, but nobody would tell me my crime or whatever it is that I had done for them to treat me that way. While I was separated from the Navy, I was trying to fight it, trying to send in my package, trying to go to court, right, so I can get a court date, so that I could everything could be restored to me, because I had all of the proof and documents to show that I did nothing wrong and they did everything wrong. They did not follow the policy. People were stealing my packages in Virginia. And then what I found was that there was a woman across the street, her and her daughter. They were paid, right, to sabotage my life. Like I said, I'm a servant of God. I am a prophet. So God started to reveal these things to me. He started sharing me what the reason why people were so frustrated in the United States Navy was because I was a prophet and I could see everything that they were doing, and they weren't expecting me to know this. So, like I said, I advanced in the United States Navy. I made first class in the United States Navy. God showed me that they were trying to steal my rank. So what they did was, when I made first, they took my rank and they gave it to somebody who was in my department, who was struggling making rank. God showed me that they did this. And I never shared with them that they stole it. But I did share with them. I kept telling them, I said, hey, did I make rank? I asked them, I said, did I make rank? And they would say, why would you think that? I would say, well, I'm just asking, did I make rank? Because you guys are blocking me from reviewing, because there's a list that comes out that shows once you make rank, there's a list that comes out that show all the people that make rank. And what my department were doing, they were blocking me from reviewing that list. So I knew that I could never prove it as being a prophet, but I knew that by their actions, there was something wrong, because I kept requesting to see this list and they refused to give me the list. And every time I asked them, I would say, hey, did I make rank? They would say, where are you getting this from? And I was like, well, you guys are keeping me from seeing the list. And there's a lot of other stuff that's taking place that's causing me to believe that I made rank, right? And then two, when I kept going to the commissary, what I found was that I was trying to get my uniform and everything ready. And they were stealing all of the badges and stuff for the rank that I was. Like, people were trying to tell me, you're no longer second class, you're first class. There was only first class that was available. So I kept asking them, I was like, what? I was like, did I make rank? And they never would answer me. They would say, well, were you flocked? That's what they would say. And I was like, no, I wasn't flocked. I'm trying to get the list to see if I made rank. And they kept asking me, but if you haven't been flocked, then don't worry about you making rank. So eventually, after months go by, because they locked the computers, so I couldn't get the list. After months go by, what they did was they did the people that were in the Masonic organization, the Eastern Stars and things of that nature. What they were doing, they were trying to get their people in place, right? To make it look like that we're going to corroborate their story. I reached out to other departments and asked them as well, because there's a department that you can reach out to regarding your evals. And when I started to look at my evals, I started my evals are not even right. There's something wrong with my evals. And there has been something wrong with my evals for my entire military career. So I reached out to that department, which was in Florida. And I was telling them, I said, I think my evals need to be evaluated. My command won't reevaluate my evals. They won't fix it. And I know that there's something wrong. Points are being taken away from me. And I said, and two, I believe I made rank in my department. They're keeping me from getting the list, right? So they isolated me to a point where there was no way for me to prove that I made rank. And then they kept me from getting the list to see if I made rank for first class. And then they put their people in place in the Masonic organization and the Eastern Stars to tell that would corroborate their story of telling me that I did not make rank. So every time I get on the phone, I talk to people now, the first thing they do is second class petty officer, because they knew that I made rank and they stole my rank. They stole my testing and gave it to someone in my department who was struggling to make the test. I used to sit in the department and I would study all day because they would not allow me to work. I would study all day, just because they have the trainings and stuff like that online. And I would try to encourage people in the department, hey, you need to study, the test is coming up. You need to study, the test is coming up. You need to do X, Y, and Z. And I was studying all day. And God permitted me to make rank. And then he showed me that when I made rank, there were people that were trying to steal the rank. And then he showed me who was the one that was trying to steal the rank. So when I got to the department, when I was in the department and the list came out, they blocked me from seeing the list. And then the person that God showed me they gave my rank to was the exact person that they gave it to. It was the exact one. The guy in my department, it was a Caucasian guy who had been struggling for years to make rank. He had been in the military a long time. And they decided to give it to him. And then they all laughed about it in my face, like it was a hidden secret, because they knew what they had done. So when all this was taking place in the United States Navy and the United States military, all this led to me being separated, because I was fighting against the people that were Masons inside of the military that were doing things they were not supposed to be doing. And I was doing it strategically. I was very respectful. I was following the policy. I was following the outline that they gave us whenever we have issues. But they did not like that I would not back down. They did not like that I stood my ground. And they did not like that they heard all this stuff about me that were not true, and they kept trying to force it to be true. So they kept being disrespectful to me in the military, trying to get me to react. They were putting their hands on me in the military, trying to get me to react. They were fighting against me, trying to get me to react. And they noticed that I wasn't reacting. So now it became a problem. So every time I started to go up the chain of command, they knew that I was in the right because I had not reacted. I was following the proper procedures. But the farther I went up the chain of command, the worse it got. They fabricated documents that were not true. And because they knew I did not have any witnesses, it was all of their words against mine. And there was nothing I can do. And it led to me being separated from the Navy without cause and without reason. So when I got out of the military, I kept fighting against it. I still have my military packages. I still have my medical records and everything. Someone stole my phone in the United States Navy and then tried to hack it. And then hacked it and tried to portray me to make it look like I was a terrorist. I went to my chain of command. I said, someone just stole my phone out of the restroom. I was gone but a couple seconds. It was an older woman that came in right after me. And I asked her, I said, ma'am, do you have my phone? She said, no, I don't have it. I said, do you have my phone? I said, just left. I had my earbuds playing. And when the earbuds cut out, that's how you know you can't be so far from the phone. I had my music playing and I put it down on the toilet, right? Because I was using the restroom, I had to put it down. So when I walked out of the bathroom, my music stopped playing and there was a woman that walked out behind me and I went in and I couldn't find my phone. I went in and I said, ma'am, do you have my phone? And she said, no, I don't have your phone. She started acting crazy. I said, ma'am, you sure you don't have my phone? I said, because I was playing my earbuds. It just went out. My phone was in the bathroom. You just came out. My phone is gone. She said, no. So I took my chain of command. I said, someone stole my phone. What happened was someone stole my phone and then they tried to betray me. When I got out of the military, they were using my phone, duplicating SIMs cards and stuff. And then what happened, someone paid the woman across the street and her daughter to sabotage my life. Like I said, I had bought a home in Virginia. I used a VA loan. And and I would sit there and I kept trying to figure out what was going on while I was getting my packages and documents and stuff together. The woman across the street, her daughter, I used to sit outside on my porch because that was my happy place. That was my peace. I would sit outside and I would read books all day. I would not go inside. All day, I would read books. All day. If I wasn't working on that package, I was outside reading the books. And then I was applying for jobs. I would do this outside on my porch. I was not able to get a job when I immediately got out of the military. No one would tell me why. No one would take me serious, right? I kept putting in application after application after application. Nothing was being done. I was watching this girl across the street stalk me all day. Whenever I came outside, she came outside. When I went in the house, she went in the house. When I came back out, she came back out. And she were using her children as an excuse to be outside, right? And I kept saying to myself, I said, this girl don't work. What is it that she do? Right? Because she would just sit outside smoking weed all day and drinking all day. And she would have people and dope boys come and sell her drugs. And then that's when God started to reveal to me this woman was paid to sabotage me. I was her mark. So I started paying attention to her. No matter what I did, this woman found a reason to say something to me. And it was always hostile and aggressive. She kept trying to start fights. I would just be sitting there looking at her. Don't shake your head. You always shaking your head. I'm sitting on my porch minding my own business. She always shaking her head trying to judge somebody. Nobody judged her. Nobody said anything to her. I was sitting, I would play gospel music. People would have problems with me playing gospel music. She always being holy, thinking she's so holier than thou. Yet every time I look up, she's shaking her head at somebody. She would always find a reason to come across the street. There were people that lived next door to me that were in the military. She would always go and contact them and come speak to them, finding reasons to come across the street so she can try to get close to me. I would run up and down my street because I used to work out. I still work out. But that was one of the ways that I used to relieve myself. I was like, I didn't want to run in the neighborhood because people were letting loose dogs in the neighborhood, right, to try to scare me. And because they knew I had a fear of dogs. It wasn't that I had a fear of dogs. It was that I had the environment was hostile. And I did not know who was raising these dogs. And what I knew was that there was people in the military who paid someone to raise a dog, right? To starve the dog and then let the dog loose on me so the dog would eat me. I saw this happening and I kept saying, who's the reason behind, who's the cause behind all these loose dogs? And I remember that God showed that to me head on. It was the military. They were paying these people. There were some people in the military paying these people to do these things to sabotage me. So instead of going running in the neighborhood, at one point, I stopped going running in the neighborhood because there were a lot of pit bulls that were being just walking around free. And the police officers wasn't doing anything about it because you had to have a leash on the dog. But there were no leashes on the dog. There weren't even any person next to the dog. The dog would just be free walking loose in the neighborhood, and then the police would come on my street, not saying anything, not doing that. I'm looking at the loose dog, and the police wouldn't say anything. And then they would look at me. Some police officers would come on my street, and they would smile and laugh, waiting on me to say something. So I got to the point where I was like, well, I'm not going to keep calling the police, because obviously there are police officers that are not trying to help me. So I started running on my street to still lose weight, because I like to be outside. I would go running up and down the street. And while I would go run up and down the street, here she come, the girl across the street. She would pull up on the street. She didn't live in the neighborhood. Her mother lived there, but her mother would go pick her up. So here she come. And then as I would run, she would finally say something to me. She always doing something. She's so weird. Why she out here running? Why she doing this? And I would just be looking at her. Why is it every time I'm outside, this girl keeps saying something to me? Even when I don't talk to her, but she says something to me all the time. And then I realized that's when God kept saying, because you have been her mark. She was paid, right? She was promised something to sabotage your life, but she never could. One day it got so bad while I was outside praying, and I realized there was church members that were involved. I was outside praying, and the girl pulled up and parked in front of my house. Now her house is 2 doors down across the street, but she parked in front of my house while I was outside praying, and she started yelling and cursing me out and all this other kind of stuff. So I decided to go ask her, because I wanted to know. I walked across the street and I said, what is your problem? Why do you keep causing problems in my life? And why are you always trying to find something to say to me? Well, you can't talk to people like that. That's what I found out, because even while I was speaking to her in a respectful manner and calmly, the girl was targeted. She was looking for a reason to have a problem, start a fight. So when I stood there, she kept pump faking her backpack, trying to get me to react. But I wasn't someone that was afraid. So she was using the backpack and jerking it, hoping that I was going to throw the first punch or react and then like hit her or something like that. But I didn't. The only thing that I kept telling her, I said, don't you hit me with that backpack. Don't you hit me with that backpack. Don't you hit me with that backpack. And she realized that I wasn't reacting. And when I got ready to walk, her mama was standing there recording on her phone. When I got ready to walk away, I said, look, I'm just going to leave, because you obviously not going to answer my question as to why you're being the way that you are. Her mama kept saying, come on, let's go inside. Let's go inside. Well, instead of them going inside, the girl turned around and pulled out a mace bottle from her backpack, and she pepper sprayed me. She pepper sprayed me for absolutely no reason. And I turned around and I went inside of the house and I called the police. I said, this woman just pepper sprayed me for absolutely no reason. When the police got there, they did nothing. They arrested the woman, put her in the back of the truck, but they never took her down to the police station. I tried to get a restraining order against this woman, right? And that caused me to go to court. When I went to court, nothing took place. The judge told me that I shouldn't have went in the middle of the street and tried to talk to the woman. That's what he told me. I was being respectful. This woman was being disrespectful to the judge while we were in the courtroom. She showed up in a tutu and a bra. No respect for the courts whatsoever. And when it was all said and done, I was dressed professionally. I had my hair done, had on a dress, had on heels, everything professionally. There was a room full of people. And this woman showed up late every time, because it got delayed 2-3 times. This woman showed up late. Sometimes she didn't show up. And then the third time when she did show up, she showed up in a tutu and a bra. And she was disrespectful towards the judge. And when I spoke to the judge, because she kept lying, she kept saying that she had a baby in her arms and that I was a threat to her and her baby. That's why she pepper sprayed me. There was no baby in sight. When I talked to the judge, I told him, I said, she did not have a baby in her arms. He said, you stop talking, because you shouldn't have went to try to talk to her. But it is my right to go and speak to someone. It is my right to address someone who is behaving a certain way and talk to them amicably. And when it was all said and done, I didn't say anything. I said, okay. He said, I'm going to throw the case out. I said, all right, so she's just going to be able to pepper spray me for absolutely no reason. You're going to throw the case out. All of this was done because these people were paid in the Masonic organization to hide what took place, because the military were paying these people. The military was using these people to sabotage my life, to fit a narrative, because they were trying to make it seem like I was a terrorist. Because they had my phone. They kept hacking my accounts, my social media accounts. They were hacking all of my devices, all of my computers. They hacked everything that I had. And then they were using people out in town to make it look like it wasn't the military, it was those people, but the military were behind those people. So I've been isolated for years because the military was trying to find a way to paint me out to be a terrorist. But I was never doing anything wrong. I was following God's instructions. I was a servant of God. And God told me, he said, you follow my commandments, everything will be fine. And I did. I was never hostile. I was never aggressive. I never yelled. I was never disrespectful. I never harmed anybody. I never bothered anybody, but people kept trying to bother me. After years of me not being able to get employed, which caused me to lose my house because I kept trying to reach out to the Navy Federal to see what could be done about my house, they treated me like I wasn't even a person. They were making moves on my behalf that I was not giving them permission to do. That was causing me to be in debt. In the end, I ended up losing my home in Virginia that I paid for, right? I ended up losing my home. Navy Federal was doing things on my behalf that they did not have permission to do. And then they treated me like I wasn't even a person. They kept closing my Navy Federal account without permission. They did not have permission to close it. And every time I called, I would ask them, I was like, is my account closed? No, it's open. I was like, because I tried to go onto it, it said that my account was closed. My Navy Federal account was closed. They would say no, that it was open. So I started going into the Navy Federal branches, and then they were mistreating me in the Navy Federal branches. They weren't giving me all of the documents that I was trying to close the account myself because they were stealing money out of my Navy Federal account. Nobody could tell me where the money was going. The branch people refused to close my account for whatever reason. I did not know why they refused to close my account. I kept asking them about my mortgage and everything that was taking place. They would not give me, there's a authorizing personnel that they give you when you have a home that you can reach out to whenever you have questions. They would not give me that person. Someone just kept doing things on my behalf, and nobody was telling me who was doing it. Then they led back to this girl. This girl stood outside watching me all day, every day, trying to find an opening. Because what they had plans, what God revealed to me is they had plans on trying to get us to get into a fight so that they can have police officers come and arrest me. To make it look like I was a known criminal, because that is the lie that the Navy told. They told a lie and made it look like I was a criminal in the military, even though I followed every policy and did everything I was supposed to do. And they knew that they did not have a case, which is why they never sent me to court, which is why I never went to court. But then it became too late. So they said, well, there's nothing that we can do about it now, because if she go to court now, she would just be able to prove everybody that was involved that helped us to cover it up. And we can't have that happen. So now we need to use people out in town to try to help paint the narrative that this person is hostile, that this person is aggressive, that she's always getting into fights, that she's always causing problems, when none of that was true. So the girl kept trying to cause problems so that we could get into a fight, and that if we got into a fight, police officers were going to come and arrest me, and the military was going to use that as a means to try to hide me. But they did this because they're so manipulative and deceitful. What they tried to do was they was trying to make it look like police officers, military personnel was always around to try to make me feel like I was protected. They were not protecting me. They were around because they wanted to be the first ones to get to me. But like I said, by the grace of God, none of this took place. Me and the girl never got into a fight. Me and the girl never got into, she tried to argue with me, but I would just sit there and just watch her just argue for absolutely no reason. All of this took place. The girl kept trying to steal my clothes. She kept trying to steal my laptops and stuff. I couldn't leave anything outside on my porch. She would come outside watching. Then she would try to use the kids to try to steal my things because she was paid. She was promised something. So everything took place. And those people knew that I was a prophet in the Navy. They knew this. and they tried to cover it up. When I got out, they realized it and they tried to convince people that I was a false prophet. So they got the churches involved. Because you guys persecute false prophets. Technically, you don't really persecute false prophets because you have a lot of false prophets. You like those prophets. You created those prophets. What they found was that I was a true servant of God and that I was a prophet and that I would not play ball and be their false prophet. So they started trying to persecute me. They started trying to do things to make it look like I wasn't a real prophet. They watched me and they stalked me. They put cameras in my house when they weren't supposed to. God revealed to me that there were cameras inside of my home that weren't supposed to be there. So when I was saying prayers, there were people listening to my prayers, and then they were combating my prayers. Every time I said something, right, to try to prophesy something like that, they were sending people to do the exact opposite so that I would think that God wasn't hearing my prayers, and then just so people that were watching would think that I wasn't a prophet. They illegally put cameras inside of that home. So I decided to put cameras myself because I knew that there was nothing that I could do to prove that they put illegal cameras. I said, let me go and put my own cameras inside of my home, and then I can use those cameras. In the end, it led to me being put out of my house. I was evicted out of my home. And there was nothing I can do about it. Nobody helped me. I was homeless for weeks. I was driving for Lyft to make some money. And I kept trying to drive money. And while I was trying to drive for Lyft, there were people that were sent to try to cause me to get into an accident. They were trying to sabotage the vehicle because they needed to make it look like there was an accident on my record, because there were people in the Masonic organization that lied and said I got into an accident, and they tried to put that on my record. I remember I was driving home to Memphis, Tennessee, and I had to get my license. I had two cars. I had a Chrysler 300 blue, royal blue. And then I had a Saturn, tannish type, grayish color. And I remember I was driving home, and I drove to Memphis, Tennessee. When I was driving back from Memphis, Tennessee, there was a guy that I knew that worked at church, and I took my car to him to be checked out before I went back home so that I could make sure that my car was going to make it back home. The tire pressure and everything was checked. Well, what I found was when I was driving home, my tire blew out. And my tire blew out and hit the backsplash, or the little floor splash that keeps the water from splashing on the car. It hit that and it caused that to fall off. But by the grace of God, there was no one around, right, that was driving behind me or on the side of me when it fell off. It fell off and it fell on the side of the road. So I pulled over, and then I realized when I pulled over, I realized it was a blown tire. Then my tire blew, and I was like, why did my tire blow? I took the car to the mechanic to make sure everything was good to go, right? And then when I got on the phone with USAA and I talked to them about it, she kept saying, did you get into an accident? I said, no, there's no accident. I said, I'm on the side of the road. My tire blew. And she was like, are you sure you didn't get into an accident? I said, no, I didn't get into an accident. I'm still on the side of the road. There's no cars on the side of the road. There's no accident. And she was like, okay, well, because we keep getting reports that you got into an accident. I said, ma'am, I'm still here. I can see your videos. So I took pictures of the car to show them. And she was like, well, we have a place that's right down the street that you can go to get your tire replaced. Can you make it there? I said, yeah, I can make it there. While I was on the phone with her, she heard that the tire, because there was a flap on the tire. And as I was driving, the flap kept hitting the car. Right. So I said, do you hear this? I said, my tire is blown. I said, that's the flap on the tire that keeps hitting the car. I said, so I'm driving to the place that you told me to go to. I went to a place that was able to repair my tire. What I noticed was that there was a car that pulled up behind me. I took a picture of that vehicle because it has slight scratches on the front of its car, right? Like it had been in an accident. But when it pulled up, it never pulled into the parking lot. It just pulled on the end and it parked there. It never went to talk to the people. And then they drove off. And I was like, why did they do that? And the first thing the Holy Spirit said is that because they're trying to make it look like you got into an accident, that person was going to try to report that you were the cause of their car being wrecked. But their car was already wrecked. It had been wrecked prior to that day. But they pulled in because the people in the Masonic organization were watching me so much. And like I said, they're in the military. The military kept tabs on me. They put things on my cards and stuff like that to watch me. So when that person pulled up, they was like, oh, it was just reported that it looks like she got into an accident. Let me pull up and use this as an opportunity to try to report an accident so they could get a free car. They can claim it on their insurance, and then the insurance could pay them to get another car. So the Holy Spirit told me this, but I had no proof. It was just me. So the people replaced my car, right? The splash on the vehicle still came off, but the tire was replaced. So I was able to make it back home to Virginia. When I got back home to Virginia, the neighbors across the street kept coming to look at my car. They were trying to take pictures of my car because they were trying to report and make it look like it was an accident. They thought that it was their prayers that had caused me to get in an accident, but it wasn't. It was the fact that my vehicle, my tire was over the air pressure. Somebody put too much air pressure in my tire, which caused it to blow. I noticed this because after that car, when that car was taken away from me by people in Virginia, what I noticed, because that car was given to the state because it was somebody sabotaged the car, and I tried to drive it out of the driveway, and I realized I couldn't get back in the driveway. I had to put it on the street. And then the people from Virginia came to collect the car. Well, I realized that when I had my other car, that someone was coming to my home and they were sabotaging the car. They were loosening the nuts on my battery so that while I was driving, the battery would glitch and it would completely stop while I was driving. But God shared this with me, which will allow me to fix it so that it wouldn't happen while I was on the road. Someone was coming and they was putting too much air in my tires. I kept checking my tires every day and I kept saying, how is there air being put in my tires overnight? How is air being put in my tires overnight? I was purposely taking air out of the tire, and then I would wake up in the morning to go check just to verify. And when I would wake up the next day, because I had a tire pressure thing, there would be more air in the tire, the same tire that I just took the air pressure out. And I realized that someone is putting air inside of the tire, right, to cause the tire to burst while I'm on the road so I can get into an accident. Because someone lied. The military, USAA, kept trying to report that I got into an accident, which was not true. I had never been into an accident. So all of this was taking place. People were being sent left and right in the Masonic organization Eastern Stars to cause hell in my life. And there was no way to prove it but to point out the fact that these people were connected to the Masonic organization. That was it. No matter where I went, there was problems. They were nasty and disrespectful and rude towards me for absolutely no reason, and I would not react. And I was recording these things, and every time I record, they would act worse because they knew they had people supporting them. All of this was in my phone, by the way. That's what happened with Uber. The Navy were paying people in Uber. They stole money. They stole like $500 from me in Uber. Then they tried to give it back, and then they locked me so I couldn't get back into the account to try to have it fixed. Eventually, when you have a record with Uber, what they do is they give you a period if they can ban you or not. And they will ban you for a certain amount of time, and then they allow you to be able to come back. Well, I can't even get into an account to talk to them to figure out what was going on. They stole money from me. And then they sent people. They were the people that were driving in Uber, they were being disrespectful. One lady, she refused to get out of my car. I had to call the police on her. And she looked like she was young. That's why I didn't put my hands on her, because I was going to snatch her out of my vehicle. Because this woman was sent. She kept trying to leave her car, her personal items in my car, right? And I kept telling her, please take your personal items with you when you are going to the store. Don't leave your purse and things in my car, because I don't want you to try to say I took something from you. Because the military was trying to paint it out to make it look like I was stealing, was a thief, because they stole my phone and they hacked it and they were portraying to be me, and they kept trying to make it look like I was the one that stole the phone and did X, Y, and Z. So they were sending people to try to make it look like I was stealing from them. And I kept telling them, don't leave your stuff in the car. This woman got in the car. She had a nasty attitude. I asked her, I said, ma'am, do you want me to end your ride and you can find someone else? I said, because I don't appreciate the way that you are speaking to me. Yeah, you can do that. I said, okay, no problem. So I pulled over. I said, you can leave the car now. I'm not getting out of the car. I said, yes, you are. I'm not getting out of the car. I'm not going nowhere. And me, like I said, I'm a person. I'm not afraid, right? I snatch anybody with no problem. And people knew this. People knew that I was not afraid. They know I don't have a problem with putting my hands on someone, especially when I know that I'm in the right. But the Holy Spirit said you need to not be like that, because that's the one thing that they're relying on. They're relying on the fact that you're not afraid. They're relying on the fact that you know that they know that you are, I'm not a fighter, but they know that you will, right? They know this. So the Holy Spirit said, don't do anything. Don't react. Don't fight anybody. Even though I knew I was in the right, I got out and I said, I'm going to snatch this girl out of my car because she needs to get out of my vehicle. And then I looked, when I got ready to snatch her out of my car, I saw that she had a young face because it was at nighttime. It was nighttime there. I said, she's young. All right, so I don't want to put my hands on somebody's kid. So I called the police. I waited for a long time for the police to get. There was a police station right down the street, less than 5 minutes away. I waited a long time for them to get there. They never arrived. I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to drive her to the police station myself. And when I got ready to drive her to the police station, she left my car door open with her foot out of the door, refusing to get out of my vehicle. I got stopped at a red light by the grace of God. I got stopped at a red light. And what took place was that at that red light, somebody bumped into me. I got ready to leave. Something happened where I don't even know what really happened. I just know that somebody slightly tapped the car because we were stuck at a red light. Someone slightly tapped the car, but it wasn't enough to damage the vehicle. But I guess they were doing something illegal because they drove off immediately. They ran the red light and everything. They backed their car up and they drove off. So I was like, well, they must have done something illegal. Maybe they had something illegal in the car or something like that, because it wasn't like the accident was bad. It wasn't even bad enough to even report it, right? And the girl got out, she got in an accident. She got in an accident. And I'm just sitting here looking at her mama showed up. When her mom showed up, I was hoping her mom was going to talk some sense to her. Her mama showed up. She started acting crazy. I didn't say anything to the mom. I said, get all of your things out of my car. The mom got the girl out of the car, but the girl left her stuff in the car. I pulled over. The girl's mom followed me to a parking lot. And I said, ma'am, your daughter's stuff is in my car. I'm going to give you her stuff. I kept trying to hand her the bag. I ain't taking that. I ain't taking that. I said, ma'am, you're going to take these bags. I'm not taking it. I'm not, because what she was doing, she was paid to cause a problem. So there was nothing that I could do. I was trying to hand her the bags. She refused to grab the bags. So I put the bags on the floor by her feet. All of the bags, I said, now come and check the car to show that everything is out of the vehicle. I ain't doing that. I'm not doing that. I said, all right, no problem. I said, clearly, you're a fool. You were paid to be a fool, and I'm not going to engage with you. So I got in the car. My mom was on the phone the entire time this was going on, by the way, because I had 2 phones at that time. So I had the police officers on one phone, and then I had my mom on the other phone. So I said, all right, I'm going to get in the car now. Your daughter has all of her belongings. You want to be a fool? You want to act a fool? I don't have time. I got in my car. I drove off. The police officer finally answered the phone because they had me on hold. I had to pull over in the parking lot. The woman followed me to the parking lot and kept yelling in the background on the phone. I mean, just going off. She got into an accident. She got into an accident. And I said, sir, someone tapped my car. I said, but it's not bad. I'm waiting on you guys to show up. I said, but that individual fled the scene. I said, they're gone. I don't know what happened. This was on Christmas. This was like a day before Christmas or the day of Christmas. I think it was like the day before Christmas because the next day I tried to drive on Christmas to make some money. And the man was like, well, okay, well, if they drove off, then there's nothing that we can do. There's like, is anybody hurt? I said, no. I said, the only thing that's taking place is woman keep following me. I keep driving off and she keep following me. So I let the window down and then I told her, I said, ma'am, I have the police on the phone. And then when I told her, I said, they're on their way. She drove off. So I waited for the police to get there. I kept trying to give them my location, but I did not really know where I was because I was in an unknown spot in the parking lot, right? And I couldn't really know where it was. I waited. I didn't hear any sirens, anything like that. When I saw that they weren't coming, I said, that's okay. Don't worry about it. I'm just going to go home. I went home. And I saw that there were police officers that were coming, but they didn't have a siren on. So I didn't know if they were coming for the scene or not. So I went home. And when I got home, I said the next day, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the police station. I'm going to report that someone hit me to make sure that I'm not at fault. So I did that. And then I took pictures of the car. There were, slight scratches. And I mean, just paint. That was it. The only thing that was messed up was there were slight scratches on the back of the car. And then my license plate frame was a little bent. The license plate frame was just a little bent. So there wasn't like any major damage or nothing like that. Nothing of that sort. So when I tried to drive the next day, Uber got the notion that I had got into an accident. And I took pictures of my car and then I showed it to them. And then they was like, well, you can't drive until you get those scratches fixed. And I was like, okay. So I didn't drive. And nothing took place when it came to, I went to the police station to get the report. They said that nothing came up. They was like, we have that you made a report. We see that, you were not at fault. We could not find the individual that hit the back of your car, X, Y, and Z. You could pay to get the report, but I didn't want to pay to get the report because I was trying to save my money. So all of this took place. These people in the Masonic organization kept sending people to cause problems, and the military was the ones behind it. So years went by, I was not able to get a job. I put in hundreds and hundreds of applications, and I always put applications at places that I know that I can get jobs, like McDonald's, Subway, things of that nature, because like I'm not a person that's afraid to start over from the bottom, right? I put applications at law firms because I wanted to be a legal assistant. And I was doing that. That's why I was going to school. And then in the meantime, while I was waiting on someone to give me a call back, I was like, you're going to go back to what you know. McDonald's, Subway. You're going to go to fast food restaurants. This is what you're going to do to make sure that you are able to put money in your pocket. Nobody was calling me back. Taco Bell. Nobody was calling me back. It took years for me to get a job, right? And while those years were going by, that girl across the street was still watching me, still stalking me, still trying to cause problems in my life. So eventually I finally got a job. I got a job at Moe's Grill. When I got a job at Moe's Grills, I did everything superb, right? I followed every instruction. They wouldn't give me any handbooks because they were fraudulent. They were trying to find a way to injure me on the job. And they know I'm a person that follows policy. They knew this from the military. They knew the truth, but they chose to make the lie the truth, because they needed to fit that narrative. They already knew the type of person I was. They knew that I was a person to follow the rules. They knew that I wasn't disrespectful. They knew that I was kind. They knew that I was a servant of God. They knew the type of person that I was. But they didn't want that person. They wanted someone else. So they were trying to fit a narrative. They weren't giving me handbooks on the job. I kept requesting handbooks. So give me the handbooks, let me go over it. They weren't training me properly. They were doing things that was going to cause me to get injured on the job, like leaving knives on the edge of the counter, right? And then trying to work at fast pace. They were putting water and stuff on the floor without wet floor signs, right? They were trying to get me to serve raw meat. I kept telling them, this meat needs to be cooked the proper way. And it ended up leading to me being terminated, wrongfully terminated on the job for absolute no reason, because I was addressing them regarding the things that they were doing, right? So then they kept pulling in, well, it had something to do with gay people. Everybody on the job was gay. So now they got another organization that they try to pull in, people that are gay. I was respectful to them, and they tried to make it look like, oh, because she was a servant of God, that means she have a problem with gay people. I don't. And they saw that. They saw that I was respectful and X, Y, and Z, but they kept using these different sects to try to cause division, right? And trying to make it look like it was because I was serving God. But it was not that. It was the fact that the military was behind these people. They were the ones that were supporting these people. So I recorded all the conversations, right? It was in my phone. I recorded everything. Whenever I took a case to someone, I recorded it because I knew I had no witnesses. And the recording was my only witness. So while I was talking to the woman was acting all crazy to the supervisor for no reason, because I didn't want to serve raw meat. And then before I knew it, I was terminated. And I kept asking her, why was I terminated? She never gave me a reason why I was terminated. I did everything I was supposed to do. So I managed to get another job at the Hilton Hotel. What I found was that the same thing took place. They were doing things at the Hilton Hotel to try to cause me to get into an accident, an injury. They were putting water on the floor, not having wet floor signs. They were having utensils and things, sharp edges and things of that nature around the area. They were there when I was supposed to do safety hazards. I kept saying this. I said, this is a safety hazard. They were trying to get me to cut things, right? And trying to get me to cut it the wrong way so that I will harm myself. The whole purpose was to try to get me to get into an injury. Then they started to send people on the job to be disrespectful. They were giving me wrong instructions, training me incorrectly. And anytime I tried to get the proper instruction, they would act all crazy and just start, being disrespectful for no reason. And I would just be sitting there looking at them. And they would try to paint the narrative to say, well, she's not comprehending. She's not doing what we told her to do. But the truth of the matter is they kept changing the training requirements. They kept doing it daily so that I would not catch on. But I had prior service, and it's common sense it's common sense to serve a certain way. It's just common sense. I had been in the food industry, so I already had prior knowledge. I was a server at Red Lobster. They did not know this. So it was common sense. I had already knew what to do, but when it comes to technicalities, I was not able to do that, like serving over your left shoulder or serving over your right. It was small things like that. But they kept changing the requirements daily. The training was incorrect. And what I found was that those people, they were not actually trained. Those people had not been there. And they weren't training me, and I ended up training them, and they didn't like that. So I was having problems on the job, and they were sending women. And then when they didn't send women, they sent gay men. And then when they didn't send gay men, they sent straight men to give me problems, because they all were trying to paint the same narrative, that I was difficult to deal with, that I was causing problems on the job, that I could not comprehend the instructions, which was not true, that I could not follow instructions. None of that was true. They were lying. So then I tried to apply for unemployment because I was wrongfully terminated. And I've been submitting my weekly claims, and I have received not one dime. I had the pen and everything. I haven't received not one dime. I've been trying to change the payments to a different bank because I closed my Navy Federal account because they treated me like trash. They treated me like crap. And they kept doing things behind the scenes on my behalf without my permission. So I closed my Navy Federal account because of this, because I said I didn't want anything else to do with the United States military after everything that they have done to me. And I want to pay back all of the debt that they put me in, that I did not have a right to be in, because I was very responsible. I practically had no debt when I got out of the military. But somehow now I got more debt, and I'm trying to figure out how. Because they were putting me in debt. They were fabricating documents, and then they were just forcing me to be in debt. So this is a spiritual aspect. The reason they were doing this is because they always wanted me linked to the United States military. They wanted to have a connection between me and the United States military. Now, that's a spiritual aspect. If you are in debt, you are forever indebted to them. So they felt like they had a right to continuously sabotage my life and destroy my life for as long as I was indebted to them. So I started trying to pay off the debt, even though I knew the debt wasn't mine. But they put so much debt on me that it would take me forever not forever, but it would take me a while to get out of debt. This is what they're doing because, like I said, a lot of them in the military were Masons, Eastern Stars. So this is what they practice spiritually. I know because some of my supervisors, they kept trying to come to me in my dreams. Because you have your seers and things of that nature. She was trying to come to me in my dreams, trying to give me commands in my dreams, but she had no spiritual authority over me in my dreams. So we get here to this point. The jobs that I was having, the military was using those people to try to paint the narrative that they painted in the military that wasn't true. And then they kept attacking me. Uber kept attacking me. There were some people in Virginia that I don't know what they were doing. Some people showed me mercy, right? So I started to drive for Lyft, and I was able to drive for Lyft, right? And those people, they would talk to me while I was in the Lyft driver. And while I was in the Lyft, and they were giving me good reviews and things of that nature because they knew my true character. But there were people that were trying to cause me to get into an accident. The military was sending people to try to cause me to get into an accident. And then what took place was that when they saw that I was no longer wanting to stay in Virginia, the military sent those same people, to get in my car to try to cause problems. I had reviews that were great. She's kind, she's nice, she does everything, all this other kind of stuff, right? The exact opposite of what people were proclaiming on Uber, because those people were paid also to lie. When the military saw that they could not get me to get into an accident because they had plans of trying to kill me in an accident. They were trying to kill me in an accident. And spiritually, they were praying for this, but they realized it wasn't taking place. So what they did, they started sending people to try to get me to get into an accident. When they saw that that wasn't taking place and they saw that I had plans on leaving Virginia, because like I said, they wanted me stuck in Virginia, they started sending people to be disrespectful, and they were sending men. They would call me out my name, call me B's and H's and all kinds of stuff for absolutely no reason. If I would say that I was uncomfortable because of the way they was treating me, they would be disrespectful. I started recording some of these people because of the way they were acting. That's when I said it's time for me to leave Virginia, because now what they did, they switched the game up and they sent these people to cause problems in my life. So I returned the vehicle, and then I left Virginia and went to Washington, D.C. But the military, still a lot of people in the military in Washington, D.C., they sent people to cause problems in Washington, D.C. But there were people that showed me mercy in Washington, D.C. as well. the whole goal that the military was trying to do, they were trying to get me back to Memphis, Tennessee. Because what they were trying to do, they were trying to create problems and issues within my family. They wanted to use my family to try to say that I was difficult to deal with, that I was judgmental, that I was that I act like I can't follow directions, that I'm a hard person to get along with. None of these things were true. And I've been isolated. All of my boyfriends and everybody that I've been involved with, they have been in isolation. Like I said, I dated people for years and they were in on it. Nobody tried to help me. Nobody did anything to help me. As a matter of fact, they delighted in the fact that I was going through this because they all were promised something. So the military was paying people in different states to sabotage my life. They were passing my pictures around. I saw people trying to take pictures of me. I saw it not just by them holding the phones because they would do little stupid stuff like that to try to trick me, but I saw people actually take a Snapchat of me and I could see myself on their phone. They were taking videos of me and I had no problem with it, but then I realized that they were doing this because they was passing my videos around to the Masonic lodges, right? And then they were sending people to try to sabotage me that way, putting stuff inside of my food when I went to restaurants. That's why I don't eat at restaurants now, because there's no paper trail. I only buy my food at the grocery stores. Because they were putting stuff in my food. At one point, they tried to take my vision. They were trying to cause me to have double vision. I was seeing, it was like a split. It wasn't split, but there was like something that took place with my vision where I saw like there was a dot and there was like, I'm trying to explain it the best way I know how. But what I know is that it was something to do with double vision because there was cracks and stuff like that I was seeing. And I stopped eating fast food and it went away. They were trying to cause me to have double vision. They started trying to take my vision because they considered me to be Paul in the Bible. Tried to make it look like I was persecuting the churches, but I wasn't persecuting anyone. The churches were being paid to try to make it look like I was mentally ill. And they were going to sign off on those documents because their members were going to back up their pastor. So people in the churches, I kept trying to find a church home and they didn't want me in the churches because they kept trying to make it look like I wasn't a servant of God. So they kept paying people and doing things to try to make me not want to be in the churches. So their members would be nasty towards me. They would be disrespectful towards me. They would bring up things that they know would probably irritate me. And when they saw that I was able to overcome that, they started sending the pastors. The pastors would come. The pastors were being paid to try to make it look like I was being in a rehabilitation center, or try to make it look like I was on drugs, or try to make it look like I was mentally ill, because they were paying their pastors to do it. And they did not want me in the church because it painted their narrative of that I'm just a lost soul who don't know God. But they always knew that I was a servant of God. So I stopped going to the churches, right? So it would look like I was not trying to persecute the church. And I started sharing the word of God online on my own social media platforms. But the military, they kept hacking my social media platforms. I kept getting locked out of my social media platforms continuously. There was nothing that I could do about it because they had access to my phone, because they stole my iPhone when I was in the Navy. I still have one of my iPhones, the iPhone that I bought, that I got to replace the other iPhone that they stole. I still have it. But for some reason, I have been blocked from using. Like, I'm going to use it eventually, right? Because the quality is better. But I was blocked from doing that as well, from using that phone. Apple did not want to be involved. They did not want to have a record because Apple back up everything. So does Google. So I have one Android and I have one iPhone. And I back up everything with Apple and with Google. My devices, I have one Apple device, which is my laptop. I had two. I broke that laptop and then I threw it away. But I have two. I have one Apple and then I have one regular, not really considered to be an Android, but just like a Microsoft window. I have it like that on purpose because the military won't back up off me. because there was a deal that was made and they are continuously sabotaging me. They stole my inheritance. What the military did that I do not have proof, I'm not able to prove it, but I know it because I'm a servant of God. I'm a prophet. They saw that I was able to see all of their strategies, which is why they started trying to make it look like I was a false prophet, because they knew that everything that I was saying was true. What the military tried to do is they tried to make it look like they tried to convince me that I was out of the military. And while I was out of the military, they still had me on record as being in the military, and they were collecting those checks. Somewhere in some account, somebody was collecting that money, and they was collecting it. So being 2-3 years out of the military, I was making about over $60-something thousand. That's about $120-something thousand if you want to round up. I would say approximately about $140-something thousand for the 2 years that I was counting. You add another 60 on top of that, right? So that's about $200-something thousand that the people were stealing from me. And someone was going to get that money. But they needed to make me believe that I was out in the military. So then when I lived as long as I lived, they managed to fabricate documents. It was like, okay, well, now we see that you are out of the military. But I still have a document online that's stating that I never got out of the military, because what they were trying to do, they were trying to make it look like I was UA. I was never UA. I have the DD-214. I still have the package. Because the military had plans on trying to put me back in the military and then killing me in war. Because like I said, everything that they did, because they're so out of control, because they're so arrogant, because they won't humble themselves before God, because they worship other idols, God is going to send them to war for it, to humble them. Because they have not only done this to me, they have done this to other people, where people have gotten paid this way. And since I didn't have any witnesses, they said, well, look, here's what we got. There's no way that she can prove, right, that we have done this. No one is going to help her get her record fixed. No one is going to help her be able to have her day in court. So right now, what we have is that she is out of the military, according to her, while we still collect these paychecks. And then because they had access to my phone, they kept getting access my information from my phone. Like when I called Navy Federal, they made me put in my PIN for one of my debit cards when I tried to have my account closed. That's because they were going to try to keep the account open. And someone was going to have access to their card while they try to find a way to make me disappear. And the best way they knew to do that was to try to make me out to be a false prophet. Even though you got plenty of false prophets running around here free, those false prophets are working on the behalf of those people. They just don't know it. So I was able to project everything and see everything that they were doing, but I was not able to provide proof. And I kept reaching out to everybody I could think of that would help me. Nobody would help me. Nobody helped me to do anything. My record is still bad. And I said, you know what? I'm going to claim that DD-214, because the military refused to fix it. And this document that they have on my record stating that there is no time period of when I got out to try to make it look like I was UA, I'm not going to go by that. I'm going to go by the document that they gave me, even if it is a lie. Because the truth of the matter is they were supposed to fix that. And they refused to fix it. They refused. They decided they didn't want to give me that inheritance. Because what happens is when you go to court, if you go back to court in the military, right, and you find that you were innocent, they have to pay back everything that you were supposed to get paid while you were out of the military. So I had been out for 2.5-3 years. So like I said, that was about $150,000-$200,000 that they were going to give back to me, because I knew that I was going to win that case, because I did not break any law and I kept extensive details, right? I had everything. But then they waited me out to where I was no longer able to keep those records. They were being shredded and things of that nature, and they took advantage of the fact that most of it was being shredded. But I kept the important details. I kept the important ones to still prove, right? I kept all of that stuff. So the military waited me out, and they figured if they got rid of those documents, and then what they can do is they can try to find a way to put me back in the military without me being able to get the inheritance, without them having to pay me back everything that they took while I was not in the military. And then they were going to force me to go back in under the pretense that I was in prison, and then try to make it look like that I was UA, right? They had a reason to come snatch me up, and then they were going to try to send me to war. And they were going to try to kill me that way. I know this because God revealed this to me. That's why it was important for me to take it as it was. I'm out of the military. And to hold on to that document, that DD 214, no matter what it says, I'm out of the military. I am a veteran. This is everything that the military has done to me. And they have incorporated the people in Masonic organization, right? Not everybody in the Masonic organization, but a lot of people. They have been sent, and they have kept me in isolation. And then they figured if they can keep me in isolation with not having friends, right? That's not a part of my family. What they were going to do, they were going to try to attack my family, and they were going to use my family to try to find a way to put me away, because it'll be me against my family members. That's what they did. There was a point in time where God told me that my brother, who was supposed to be killed, who was supposedly killed, right, in prison, God said he's not dead. And I said, okay. And I kept reaching out to my mom. I said, Mom, God said he's not dead. My mom kept saying he's dead. I said, okay, no problem. So to keep me and my mother from fighting and arguing, I decided to leave it alone. I said, all right. She said he is dead. I'm not going to call God a liar. I'm just going to go ahead and go in whatever they say. Because, like, again, you don't have proof. Only thing you know is you have God. And like I said, the military, what's taking place, they're trying to wait me out. So I said, okay, no problem. If you say that he is dead, then he is dead. And I don't want to argue with my family anymore. I don't want to have any problems with my family anymore. So we will leave it at that. I won't bring it up. We won't talk about it. But because everything has taken place within me and my family, I have decided that I don't really want to reconnect with my family. I'm here with my mother and my father because I wanted to give myself time, because we had been apart for so long. We've been apart for years, and every time we reconnected, we fought. And I did not like that. So I said, we're going to come back and we're going to try to fix it. We're going to do it the right way. But reconnecting with the rest of the family, I don't want to reconnect with the rest of the family, because a lot of things took place in my family. And I don't have time for the military to try to use my family as a means to add another thing to the lies that they have already told. So I take my time and I focus on going to school, right? Which there's some stuff that's taking place. I take my time going to school, trying to get a job so I can support myself, so I can pay the military back everything that they claim that I owe, that I know it's not true. Because like I said, I was practically out of debt when I got out of the military. I paid off almost everything, literally almost everything, when I got out of the military, because that was my goal before getting out of the military. I said, you're going to pay off all your debt before you get out. So I knew I did not have any real debt, right, in the military, but somebody fabricated documents and they put this debt on me. So now I have to pay it back. And I said, okay, don't worry about it. There's nothing you can do about it. Hold your head high, suck it in, do whatever you can to pay off this debt, even if it don't belong to you. So this is what I took. There's so much more that God revealed to me that was taking place, but it's too long on this video, so I'm not going to share it. I'm going to share it piece by piece. But there's so much that God allowed me to see that was taking place within the United States military, that was taking place within the Masonic organization, that was happening in my life. And I have been left with no choice but to speak about it. So I am going to speak about it. And I'm going to share the good news of what God has done for me in the process. Because like I said, I'm alive today, not because anybody helped me. I'm alive today because God was with me. I'm alive today because God had his hand on my life. I'm alive today because he spared me. He showed me mercy and he gave me grace. I'm alive today for these reasons, and these reasons alone. It was God. And that is it. And I'm going to continue to share the good news about what God did for me in my life, how he transformed my mind mentally, how he transformed me spiritually, and how he transformed me physically. And he is continuously doing these things. And I am going to state again that I am a servant of God. I was called to be his prophet to the nations. And what I have found is that your United States military is out of control. What I have found is that United States of America has dove head first into witchcraft and sorcery without any repercussions or consequences for their actions. And what I have found is that there's a lot of corrupt practices that have been taking place in the Masonic organization, because you guys are so well connected and it's hard to trace it back, and you guys have not been humbled. That is what I have found. So I'm going to continuously speak out against all of you. And I'm going to encourage you to repent of your sins.